Today we're going to talk about how to create apps rapidly with Fiori elements. Just for names, this is my co-chief product owner, Katja Zoch.
Hi.
My name is Sebastian Steinhauer, and we are responsible for Fiori elements. We do, in the role of product owners, talk a lot about things that will come up in the future. And we will also show you guys a couple of lab previews of things that we have not yet released. So please do not base any buying decisions on this, and consider any feedback or statements about future development, future features, basically lies when we tell them. Don't trust us on any of it. It might or might not show up. But keep that in mind, and let's briefly talk about what you're to expect. We're going to talk about the fundamental idea behind Fiori elements and why it's important, and then we're going to show you how we can create and extend these apps. So if you walk around the show floor today and the show, you see a lot of focus on Fiori 3. So you see a lot of applications that are looking slightly different than they were looking a year ago, that actually pick up the latest theme. We have a lot of improvements that feed our user experience story. So this all started back in 2013 when we launched the Fiori initiative, and there were a number of super interesting apps that we rolled out. There was a lot of attention, and we had only about 25 apps or so at the time. And then from there, we went on to Fiori 2, so we actually introduced the Fiori Launchpad with a slightly changed side panel with notifications popping up. There's a lot of exciting changes that were coming with Fiori 2 in 2016, and it got more and more attention. And from there, the Fiori story has been growing. This year, the main focus is on Fiori 3. So if you're walking around and you see all these Fiori 3 apps, it's super important to notice that most of them are Fiori 3 at the show because they're using Fiori elements. And I'll explain a little bit later why that is. But first, let's take a look at what these Fiori elements apps with Fiori 3 look like.
Okay. For those who have already attended the Fiori Elements session last year, I have to tell you that I will show you the same apps again as I did last year, but now they are in Fiori 3 without changing any line of code. What you can see here is one of the famous floor plans. It's an overview page, and as the name already says, it gives me a great overview and some nice cards about what is going on in a specific business area. I can click on the header of a card, and the system navigates me directly to a list report. I can get a list of everything, I can filter, and I can navigate to the object page from there. The object page is basically one of the most common floor plans we have. It gives me a detail about a specific object. In the header, I have the most common information. In the so-called sections, or let's say technically facets, remember that name, you will see it later again, I can have more information about the object. And as you can see, we already have a lot of built-in functionality in our Fiori Elements apps.
And that really is where the magic of Fiori Elements comes into play, because you saw Katja navigate between these pages. You saw her using the search, filtering the list through. There's variant management in there. There's automatic editing capabilities in there. And all these features come out of the box with Fiori Elements. So nobody actually had to go in and develop these. It's not quite true. Somebody at SAP had to do that. But if you're using Fiori Elements, you don't have to do it. So that is where the value of Fiori Elements comes into play. It's all about developer efficiency. We're trying to make the life of developers easier, better. We want to make sure that everyone has a good time creating Fiori apps. So we're taking the back-end service and we build on top of that, and we build following the proven UI concepts that SAP is using for everything that we ship in our Fiori apps. So any Fiori app that you build will consistently work with the SAP provided apps. And that's where the UX consistency value proposition of Fiori Elements comes into play. Because if you create these apps, it's super important that your users don't have to learn every single app individually, but that all the apps behave the same. So that the user feels right at home in the app. They don't actually see a difference between the apps that you created versus the ones that SAP ships. So you can create a seamless user experience. And of course, the last and most important focus of Fiori Elements is on enterprise readiness. Because you can look at the App Store and you can see that it is not a huge effort to maintain a single app. Everyone can do that. But if you're starting to maintain a dozen, 2 dozen, 50, 100 apps, then you can see that what we call base load grows. So you're spending more and more time in maintaining apps that you have created without being able to add additional value. Now, SAP has had this problem before. So we have started out with 25 Fiori apps that we built, and after a while we realized that we couldn't go at that pace that we wanted to go at if we kept adding more and more apps, because we would basically need to hire more and more people to maintain them. So Fiori Elements is the solution that SAP developed for the development of Fiori apps by SAP, and we're making that same solution available for you to build your own Fiori apps, because it allows us to scale and it will allow you to scale your Fiori development. Now, of course, that's great benefits, but there's also a little bit of consideration. So we're making it much easier to develop these apps, and we'll see that in a second, but we also reduce the flexibility. By reducing the flexibility, we're able to create a more consistent user experience. We make it possible to reduce the cost and the effort, but you don't get to do everything you might envision. There's kind of guardrails that keep you on track to where the overall SAP user experience is going. And all in all, it is designed to reduce cost for you on the maintenance side as well as on the creation of the apps. And when we talk about this reduced flexibility, there's, again, an upside to that, because if you look at all our design guidelines that we have, there is a lot of information. How should buttons look like? What colors to use? How do headers behave? And then even if you go further and look at the interactions, like how do you navigate from one page to the other, all of that is specified in a lot of documents. Now, of course, you don't want to really work through this and become a full-on expert in this, because Fiori Elements is able to provide you that capability out of the box. So let's take a look on how you can create a Fiori Elements app.
Okay, you can see their nice lab preview. So when we both found each other at Sapphire this year, we talked to a lot of customers, to a lot of SAP mentors, and the feedback was clear. The existing tool suite we have is falling short. So after Sapphire, we did a step back. We looked at what we have, and yes, so we needed to pivot. We decided to come up with a new tool suite, and this is the suite I want to show you now. It's brand new, it's not yet released, and I hope everything is working as expected. So, okay. I'm in Visual Studio Code. It's a lightweight IDE. We are also planning to release the extensions I will show you with this SAP Application Studio. We will come to this in a bit. So I can easily, I can open my command palette. I can type in SAP, and then you can see those are the extensions we are right now working on, with commands. So let's start. I want to show you how to generate a Fiori Elements app on an OData service based on V2. And the app I want to generate is a list report with the possibility to navigate to an object page. I want to have that the list report shows me a number of products. So I need an OData service that I can use to fetch the data from the backend. I need to connect to the system, authenticate myself.
If you guys are wondering what this OData thing is, we're going to talk about that just in a second.
Okay, you can see that what happened in the background is we are downloading the metadata from the service, and you can see that we already proposed the main entity for the page, a product. So let's give the app a name.
Guys, remember that app name, because we're going to see that later in the title. We want to make sure that Katja isn't cheating and showing us a different app than the one she's creating right now.
So now, in the backend, we are creating a complete project.
So there's an NPM build process running here where it downloads and gathers all the pieces that it needs. It does not only just create the scaffolding for the app, but it actually creates an entire runtime environment around it. So it takes a moment to do all of that. And I think it has finished.
Yes. This is the UI project. This is what will be delivered. The SAP UX folder is the folder we need for our tooling. And the great thing is I can already run the app in a preview mode in the browser.
Wait, that's without writing anything?
Yes, and I don't have to authenticate again. Because what you also can see is what is running here is locally. So we are using mock data in that case, so you don't need to access the backend. So just in case the backend is not available, you can keep going. But for sure, I'll show you later how it works with the backend.
And you can see the app title that Katja entered earlier in the title of the app, so at least we know that we are seeing the right thing.
Yes. And I can already navigate from an entry in the list report to an object page, which is still a little bit empty, but we get there.
So we've just seen Katja create an object list report and then navigate to an object page. This is the most common pattern that we see used across SAP, because if you think about it, everything that you do in the business is generally about some sort of object that you're processing, and usually you have more than one, so it makes sense to render them in a list. And since lists are so important, we have two more lists. We have the analytical list page, which allows you to get a graphical interaction to drill down in your data to find the object you're looking for, as well as the work list, which is basically a glorified to-do list. The important part here is that in the enterprise context, a lot of what you do is about getting things done, and so to-do lists are super important. Now, the overview page is the last one that we support, so we have 5 different floor plans at this point, and we saw a pretty awesome overview page earlier today. So we had a customer walk up to us and show us their scenario they had built. And they have built a solution that would provide a customer 360 on an individual customer in a call center scenario. And it called not only into a standard ERP system, but it was actually pulling data from different data sources about that customer. Among that were multiple ERP systems that had different facets of information on this customer, and all that was pulled together in one overview page. It was super cool to see that. Actually, I think there was also a non-SAP system in this. So they had actually pulled this data from different data sources. Super nice to see. Yeah, so the overview page is actually a super powerful concept. If you watch the Las Vegas keynote, it was shown as part of the keynote as well, how you can use an overview page and then drill down into additional information. If you ask me, the combination of an overview page with a list report and an object page is super common and is a very powerful concept. So if you're looking at what to design for your Fiori Elements apps, that is a standard pattern we're seeing. But now let's go back to what Katja actually did in her demo. So she put in this cryptic URL that was going somewhere, and that was a URL for an OData service. So a couple of years back at TechEd, there was a lot of talk about that REST is going to change the world. And everyone was super excited that now SAP was also doing HTTP requests. REST is all about standard HTTP with a couple of very simple actions, post, put, delete, and get. And the question was, well, what do we do with this? And as we kept working on this, we found out that it is great that it is such a simple and under-specified protocol. Everyone can claim that they now do REST. But if you want to work on a complex service, it helps to have a little bit more specification. So SAP wasn't the only company that had this problem. There was actually an industry problem to find out how to specify what to expect from a REST service. So there's an industry consortium now that has created the OData standard. The current version of that is 4. something, but the idea is that you can define how you actually query the data in the backend, so what used to be the standard REST GET request, or how you can actually send data back to the backend. And not only does it define how you query the data, which is super important, of course, in our context, because you saw Katja actually filter down on the existing data, but it also defined the concept of annotations. Annotations allow us to provide information on what the data is that's rendering on, or that's being provided by that service. And then Fiori Elements can pick that information up and then knows how to render the data on the screen for you. If you get a standard REST response, it might have a simple data field, and it might have a name, but you don't have necessarily an expectation on what that is. In this case, we can attribute the data, and we know that a specific field in our response will in fact be an email address. And once we know that this is an email address, Fiori Elements picks that up and looks at the product standard effectively and renders an email address the way email addresses are currently rendered. If that changes in the future, that's where the scalability piece of Fiori Elements comes into play again. Fiori Elements will know that it changed, and it will render email addresses according to the new specification. So you only define that there's an email address that you're getting from the backend, and Fiori Elements knows what to do with it, renders it, and will automatically take that annotated data set into the future and make sure that you actually have the right rendering in the future for this. Now, when we talk about annotations, the question is, what do those actually look like, Katja?
Okay, you can see that I have here an empty object page, which is a little bit boring. So let me add some annotations to see more content. Okay, I'm now in my local annotation file. Let me see what I can do here. I just simply press Control Space, and there is something called annotations. I need to specify a target. I just do again Control Space, and it gives me the connected OData service. And from there, as I want to show something for a product, let me select the right set. I showed you that in the first demo, I talked about sections, technically facets. I want to create such a facet now. So again, count completion, facets. I need a facet, and here I can specify the annotation path. So what I would like to show is a small table that contains some sales data for my specific product. So let me try to find the right entity set. It's 2 product sales data, and I want to have it in a table. So I need a line item annotation. Let's add a nice label.
And again, we can remember the label because we will see that on the screen.
So I save it. You can see that the preview gets refreshed. Let's help a little bit. And here we have the table. And as usually, if you have a table, you want to navigate also to some details. So let's add another object page. You can see here nicely described the flow of the app, but we also have a visualization. So you can see we have the list report, we have an object page, and I want to have a second one. So I can hit plus, select the right entity set, product sales data, hit save. It gets refreshed, and now I have that small error. So I can navigate to an up to now empty object page. Okay, as you can imagine, I go back to my annotation file. Let me add another annotation, but this time for product sales data. Let me close this so that I have more space. Again, a facet. So I think you get the pattern. And this time I don't want to have a table. I want to have a nice field group, something that gives me just the title and the value of the data. So I'll add a field group. Again, a nice title. Save it. And now here I can see the sales data details.
That was pretty impressive, I think. By the way, if you're wondering what that file format was that Katja was changing, that's called EDMX. Now, let's briefly talk about what we've just seen. So we started out by having a backend service. That's where that OData URL was pointing at us. But it could be any other backend as long as it exposes OData. We actually do have another customer that is using this on top of a SharePoint instance where they're exposing their OData service from. Now, these can or cannot have annotations. So we saw that some of the annotations that Katja was referring to were already provided by the initial service. She didn't create them. They were just magically there. So they have been coming from the backend service. On top of that, we used UI5 with Fiori elements. So we ship Fiori elements as part of UI5. Anything you have with UI5 will have Fiori elements inside of it, and you can use it. There's no additional license cost or anything like that for Fiori elements. On top of that, we have the application configuration. So you saw Katja actually adding the page to it. So that's what application configuration does. And then there's something like UI5 flexibility. We're going to talk about that in a second. There's something else called extensions. It's another concept where you can change things. And we have the ability for you to add local annotations. So what Katja did when she changed this EDMX file was she was adding local annotations to the app. They're tied to the app for the life cycle of the app. And in this case, we're not part of the backend service. Now, when we talk about these different concepts, let's start out by talking about extensions. Extensions is the ability that we give you to inject your own UI5 coding in, or JavaScript coding, in specific parts of the rendering process. So there are certain interactions that happen on the screen, and you can inject your code to be called at these places. Now, this is a pretty powerful concept. You can change the behavior of an app. You can add your own logic to an app by leveraging that. However, I want to start out with a word of caution on this, because you can use this very easily for very small changes, and if you stay within the realm that we describe for this, then these are also generally somewhat upgrade safe. However, if you're going further and you're starting to add additional code, inject your own controls, then this code that you create will not have the same advantages that we talked about when using Fiori elements. You will have to go and you will have to maintain it. You have to make sure that it will continue to work as the framework evolves, because it is based on whatever the framework is at the time that you're creating your extension to the app. So keep that in mind whenever you're creating extensions. It's good for smaller things, but if you're looking at larger things, maybe consider a freestyle app that comes with that additional overhead from the beginning, and don't try to fight the floor plan with your extension. We've unfortunately seen a couple of cases where people really tried to force a floor plan to show a behavior that it wasn't designed to have. So please don't do that. But let's also talk about the other options to change things.
Okay. So what I love is you can also open the preview right away in Visual Studio Code. So I can change the app, and I can see the changes immediately. And what is really annoying for me is I always have to press this Go button to get the data. So I have for each floor plan a page here. Let's take this here. Let's get rid of it. So let's see what I can do here. I can see there is a so-called enable auto-binding feature. And if I set this to true, if I save, and this is now in the background, there's an SAP UI5 flexibility change created. I can see that my data is loaded immediately. But
Can you prove that there's now a UI5 flexibility change in there?
yes, there's a changes folder, and here you can see the newly generated change. But okay, I know a lot of parameters by heart. Not everybody knows the parameters, so we have also a version for people that are not that nerdy as I am. So come on, Sebastian. It's your turn.
Great. What do I do?
Okay. We get a lot of feedback that it's very difficult to understand what you can do with a Fiori Elements app. So we are investigating into an extension. Just open the command palette. And yes, he's a Windows user. I'm a Mac. Let's see.
Can you hold the microphone?
Or can you use?
I don't know. All right, so there's a... Do you guys hear me, right? OK, I did open that command palette, I think.
No, you did not.
How do I do this? There we go.
Now you have it. Search again for SAP UX.
SAP UX.
And there is a command called Open Guided Development.
That's perfect, because I need some guidance here.
Yes, you do. It's basically an in-place hub. And what I think makes sense, usually whenever you have a table, it makes sense that you can have the possibility to download it to an Excel file. So let's search for Excel, because we don't know how to do this. Open the documentation. And there is a detailed description what you have to do. And the great thing is you even don't have to copy the code. You can just simply hit apply. So you need to take care that the right file is opened on the other hand side, yes. But then you can hit apply. You can see the entry is automatically there. You can hit save. And now you need to be fast and go back to the preview so that everybody sees that there is now a possibility to download.
There we go. There's an Excel download option here. Cool.
And now I think it makes sense that we also show you that we can run this app connected to a backend. So maybe you can start the server, npm start. Go back to the browser. It listens to localhost 5000.
All right, there's our app. I think I clicked it.
Authenticate yourself, because now we are connected to the backend. Should I type in your password?
Yeah, please. That would be very helpful. I don't remember what I put in there.
And now you can see the app is running with the backend, because there's also some nice data.
But Katja, this is beautiful data. But I think we did talk about UX consistency.
Do you see it? It's Fiori 2. It's Belize.
Can you fix that?
Yes, sure. Let me close this window. And that's so simple. I just have to go to the theme parameter, change this from SAP Belize to Fiori 3. Save it. Oops. I need to. Rerun the server.
Let's see if this is really working.
Here you go. It's Fiori 3.
Pretty cool, I would say. So you have now seen our lab preview, and we're trying to make this the best way for you to create Fiori Elements apps. Now, for you to give us feedback on this or any of the other SAP product, we would really like you guys to join us in the SAP Usability Test Center, really just out in the lobby on the left if you exit. And there you can actually provide your input. You will be sitting with people that are working on these products every day, and we have the ability to learn from you, and this is really what we love about this show, because we can get your direct, unfiltered feedback on the tools we're working on the products we're working on, and that will directly impact where we're going with these products. So please make sure that you actually take that opportunity, sit down with some experts to go through these scenarios in detail and provide your input on whether we're going in the right direction or not. Now, earlier we talked about the fact that we're providing these extensions or planning to provide these extensions in Visual Studio Code and the SAP Application Studio. The SAP Application Studio is the upcoming next generation of the SAP Web IDE. And you can actually find the team on the show floor, and they're happy to give you a demo and show you what they have and where they're going with the Application Studio. The Application Studio will be still browser-based and pre-configured, but it will be much closer to, in terms of experience, to what you've seen on Katja's laptop with Visual Studio Code. The key advantages are that you can have a pre-configured experience, so it is not an individual responsibility to set up their own environment, but it can be centrally deployed and commissioned for your users. So you'll have the advantages of having a cutting-edge development tool and built-in integration with SAP products. So this is slightly easier for you to get started with, and the most important thing is that the goal of the Application Studio is to increase productivity. But really, when it comes to what this show is about, and you come home from TechEd and somebody asks you what you have learned at TechEd, I think there's 3 important things that you guys need to remember. Now, granted, I'm slightly biased, but the 3 important things that you need to take away from this TechEd is that Fiori Elements accelerates app development, and I mean, we have seen the proof point. Katja was able to create an app really, really quickly. It also enables UX consistency, because the apps behave exactly like the SAP apps because you're using the exact framework that SAP is using to create these apps. And we're also super proud of the fact that at this point, 86% of the apps that were created or that are created, release for S/4HANA are created with Fiori Elements. So think about that. SAP is using this framework for all the 86% of the Fiori apps that we're creating, and you now can use that exact same framework. So that is super cool. Of course, we would love you to co-innovate with us and that you can provide us your feedback on where we're going. And to do that, you can sign up. We have a brand new Fiori Elements support newsletter. We promise not to spam you, but we'll send you important updates on where Fiori Elements is going, what the framework is doing, when our beta program is starting for these tools. All of that is available through this newsletter. So either go to link.personas.help/FE-news or leverage that beautiful QR code and sign up for our newsletter. Of course, this is TechEd, and we also have the ability for you to access this learning content year-round through the different channels. This is a recorded session, so you can go back and watch it again if you fell asleep. There's also more important sessions that you can attend that are focused around the UX tracks. Now, this concludes the recorded part of this session, and we can open it for questions and answers.
The template used for the list app in the web, in the Visual Studio, is it released already? Where you make the annotation for the Excel export and so?
Unfortunately not, but we're getting ready for a beta program. So if you're interested, just talk to us, sign up to the newsletter. We're happy to work with you and give you a chance to try it out.
Is there a plan when we could use that?
Did you just try to trick me publicly to talk about a release date of a future product?
Sure.
That's not going to happen. But nice try.
About SAP Application Studio, will it be provided by the cloud platform, like Web IDE?
Katja, do you want to take that one?
Yes, it's provided by the Web IDE people, and they are planning to start a beta soon. So if you want to join, feel free.
They're on the show floor, so don't hesitate to find them. They have also a nice demo that they can give.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. My question is, when you changed the theme, I think it was the theme, to SAP Fiori 3, what was the difference? Because to me it looked more or less the same.
I think we're staring at these screens for too long, Katja.
No, I think the color and the theming changed. Fiori 3 was more blue, while this one is now gray. Also the launchpad tile and the top they changed, so where the icons. So if you want to, we can have a session later and I show you both in parallel, then you will definitely see the changes.
We also have to admit it was kind of oversimplified. We only focused on the theme. Fiori 3 is significantly more concept work behind it, but the theme is the thing that we thought would meet the eye.
Quick one, is there any plans for Eclipse support?
Come again?
Eclipse IDE support, any plans?
Well, technically the SAP Application Studio I think is based on Thea, but in general the focus is more on Visual Studio Code at this point, and then with the Application Studio you get the browser-based experience. We also have a part of the extension that we're working on that is more on the service creation side, because I assume that when you're talking about Eclipse, you're also talking about integration with the ADT framework. So we have a couple of things in mind on how to look at service creation, and we can show you in a different setting. They need a larger screen to demo, and that doesn't work with the resolution.
Thank you. I have a question about annotations. Is there a place where a developer can get familiar with all possible annotations, for example? Because for me, while using annotations, it's always like try-error approach. And
you can find some examples for local annotations in our documentation, and we are working on, let's call it a feature map, so that you can see the annotations, how they would look like locally, how they would look like in CDS, and what is possible with which floor plan. So this is something we are working on, or we're investigating into this.
Thank you.
There's also a very verbose wiki that simply lists them with a description, but I think that is where it comes into this try and error development style. So we're working on it.
Thank you.
One question about the development environments. There was one based on Visual Studio Code and the other one was web-based. Will it be available on-premise or is it a cloud development environment, the web-based tool?
So the idea was that for an on-premise development, we would have the Visual Studio Code offering, and if you prefer a cloud-based offering, then we have the SAP Application Studio. Okay, so that's kind of the trade-off that we're looking for at this point. I know that the Web IDE team is also considering an offline capability possibly in the future, but then again, I cannot speak to their roadmap. Any further questions? All right, in that case, thank you for attending.
Thank you.